19th man again is Simon. Hi, Simon.
Hello, Phil. How are you?
Well, I'm okay. Of course, our program is tinged with sadness tonight because we only just learned in the fishing show, and David Mann will want to contribute to this as well, we just learned of the passing of our good mate, Paul Barber.
Yes.
And I'm sure during the night, various people associated with our station and listeners too will be very keen to pay a tribute to him.
If I may be permitted to go first and say, when I first started here at 3AW, I started coming in 1993, so Paul was doing drive at that stage, and I got official employment here in December 95. Paul Barber was the one person here that I had an association with, although a bit of a distant one. Friends of mine ran the Rill Caravan Park, where he had a caravan. And so he was the one person here who I had something in common I could talk about outside of the station. And so when I started here, of course, he was doing drive, which ran till 8 back then, with his in profile and the like. So we would often cross paths with him as we were heading into the studio and he was leaving. So he would stop and chat, and he welcomed me to the station when I started, and was my first, I guess, friend within the building. But outside of you and Bruce, of course.
Oh, we ignored you for the tour.
Yes, and you didn't give me a lift home when my car got stolen. There's a list of mine.
And didn't go to the wedding.
Didn't go to my wedding. There's a whole lot of reasons why Paul Barber was a much nicer person than you.
It was Bruce who stole the car.
But so Paul was the first person in the building who really made me feel welcome and part of the 3AW family. So I was devastated the day he was sacked, but that's the nature of the business. He had admittedly turned a little feral on air, perhaps, and his time had come to go from the station. So I was very sad the day he left, and I have many times wanted him to come back on and do bits and pieces with us for Remember When. But he always politely turned us down and said thank you, but no, I'll give it away.
Now, David Mann, your memories and association with Paul Barber.
Hello, Phil. Good evening, and good evening, Simon, and to all the Nightliners. Yes, it's another sad day. You just walk through the corridors here, and we've got the memorial there to David Hooks, and then you think of Ross Warneke, you think of Clinton Gribus, so many of the greats of AW. And I spoke to Michael James, and I'm sure he won't mind me mentioning this earlier on today. Michael was by Paul's bedside because probably some people don't know, but the James family, Darren and Kathy, his wife, and Michael and Alice, that's Darren's son and daughter, were very, very close to Paul Barber through all the years, because Paul obviously travelled with Darren, and they broadcast from all across the world. And I believe that Paul was Alice's godfather. And so I spoke to Michael today. He was at Paul's bedside, and they'd all assembled there because they knew that it was perhaps only a matter of hours. And so I think of Paul and his extended family, but also to our own family, of the James family, Darren and Kathy and Michael and Alice and their friends, because I know throughout the years, Darren, anyone who's listened to Darren, he'd always sort of managed to mention Paul somewhere along the line, or Paul this. But personally, Paul, I remember Paul as, first of all, a great producer. He had an uncanny knack of hearing what the personality was saying on air, with obviously Darren in most cases, and then getting it happening in what we call the booth. So outside of the studio, getting the right people to respond to the topic. So a great producer, and then in his own right, an on-air personality. Very, very gentle man, very humble man, and at one stage, and I may be corrected, I believe he was training for the priesthood, and he was a very softly spoken man. And although he could really dish it out, that was perhaps a lot of the on-air side, Phil, rather than the face-to-face. And he had the best head of hair. I can remember that. He was always well-groomed, with a great head of hair and a lovely smile. Yeah,
Bruce and I have very fond memories of his 60th birthday party at Leonda. I don't know if you were there that night. And he bankrolled the whole party. He invited about 200 of us, including Darren and the different people you've mentioned. They were all a part of the night. But he footed the bill for the whole party, which was very generous of him.
And I think that sums him up, Phil. Generous person,
Yeah.
and very giving of his time to other people. And in the latter stage of his career, obviously he changed from the media to government, and that, bureaucracy can sometimes bring you down. But I believe he did a very good job there. So it'll be a very sad day, sad evening for many, many people, but some great memories, because he was part of that era when radio was changing. And it's funny, Simon said, I actually forgotten that he was sacked. But
Yes.
when you said it, I was going, oh yes, you're right. But he really let them have it. Not only the topics, but the owners.
Yes, and Jeff Kennett was in his firing line. I remember very vividly his last interview with the Premier, Premier Kennett at the time. And Jeff, you know how good and strong-willed a person Jeff Kennett is.
Yes.
He could not get a word in with Paul.
Paul was yelling.
Jeff would say, Paul would ask him a question, what are you going to do about this? Well, I think the plan is to... Oh, so it's only a plan, is it? And would really... He just tore strips off Jeff Kennett.
Really?
And that was the day before. That was an interview that he did on the Monday. On the Tuesday, the ratings came out, and he had slipped slightly again, and he went down into single figures at that stage, and management decided he would go.
Is that when Sports Today came on there for the first time?
No, he was replaced for 2 weeks by Shane Healy.
Oh, yes.
And after the 2 week period of Shane doing it, he was filling in whilst they organised the replacement. The replacement was Steve Price.
That's right.
And Price, he introduced Sports Today because he couldn't be bothered doing 4 hours a night.
Exactly. So during the night we will pay tribute to Paul Barber, who's sadly just passed on, and maybe play some grabs from some of his shows.
Yes, I'm just looking. I've got archival material, but having only heard the news a couple of minutes ago, it's not quite at my fingertips. So we'll get some.
But it will be.
Isn't Simon brilliant? Because Simon has been doing a lot of research on the 80 years of 3AW for, doing it for Remember When, for you and Bruce. But I think, Simon, it's nice to be sitting in the studio with you. You are the most knowledgeable person in this building by far of the 80 years history of 3AW, and it's just wonderful. And Simon has preserved so many of our archives, obviously the audio side of it, but also the printed side of it. And it's wonderful because a lot of places don't have their history. But well done to Simon Owens for doing it, and maybe, who knows, a project might come out of it at one stage. But 80 years, and Simon only relatively new, only been here, 20 years?
Yeah, I'm a
20 years, and you've got the 80-year history in your brain.
Baby of the station. I've only been here for a quarter of it.
I can tell you about the 70s. I was a weekend music man, long before David Mann was the messenger.
I know, and you were replaced because you didn't sound butch enough.
I didn't sound enough like Darren Hinch. You know the story.
Right.
Terry Smith was the program director at the time, and he came back from New York with this phony American accent and called me in one day after I'd been doing music programs for 10 years, sat down Sunday to say, sorry, you don't sound enough like Darren Hinch. He's the sound of 3AW. I said, but I'm not doing talkback, I'm doing a music show. So he said, well, there'll be a parting of the ways. So I tuned in the next Saturday to see, doing my music show, who sounded more like Darren than I did, and my replacement was Helen Jackson.
That's right.
That's right.
It was too.
Yeah,
Helen Jackson, and then she had the Sexually Speaking program of a Saturday evening, which was eventually taken over by Yvonne Lawrence.
Actually, I would hate to correct you, so I pose this as a question, but were you not replaced by Carol Brown?
No, I've got several different versions.
No, you like to say it's Jane Holmes.
Jane Holmes, but it was actually, in reality, it was Helen Jackson.
Okay.
Now,
You were on at 6:15 on a Saturday at that stage, but Carol did it the week after you got axed.
No, well, I also did the afternoons, Saturday and Sunday afternoons when there was no footy.
Okay. So,
and that was good. Phil knew his music.
And Muriel Cooper was doing Saturday nights at the time.
Very dark days for 3AW.
And I